And welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Wizard Factory podcast, where you subscribe to weekly videos exploring deeper knowledge of the universe and yourself. My name is Logan Hart.
And I'm Brian Easterday.
And make sure you hit the subscribe button if you're new here. And make sure you stay to the end of this episode. We have a very exciting and special announcement. So we've been working on a new project. So make sure you watch all the way to the end of this episode. And let's dive in. So this week's episode is going to be looking at developing leadership and the importance of learning essential skill sets for sustainable freedom. Keyword sustainable. I think on this platform, we're very much about the paradigm shift. We want to see really big change in the world. Well, that's not just going to happen magically overnight. And the more you listen to this channel, you'll probably come more into alignment with the truth that you are the hero you've been waiting for. We don't talk about saviors here. Save your damn self. Everybody is a sovereign being, and we are all co-creating the situation that we're currently experiencing here on this planet. So it's every person's responsibility, and this platform is all about exploring what that means and how to create conscious change on a fundamental level, specifically the natural law level of cause and effect. So we're going to be looking at a few little topics under this umbrella regarding leadership and mentorship, entrepreneurship, business and marketing, and communication, sales, and public speaking in general. So let's start with leadership. And as we usually do here, start by defining some terms. So what is a leader? Literally, to lead means to go first. So a leader is one who goes first, who leads by example, and who develops other leaders, not for the purpose of controlling people, but to empower them. So true leaders create leaders, not followers. And, the importance of mentorship, meaning having a leader to learn from. So, and that person can be dead or alive. You don't even have to know them personally. You're receiving mentorship by reading books, watching videos, even if it's on YouTube. Some consider us mentors. We have our own mentors that we follow. Some we know, some we may never meet in real life. But it's just important to be learning from people who are equal in power, potential, and rights, but just a little ahead of the game, essentially, who has a little bit more knowledge than you, that you can stand on the shoulders of the giants in that way. So Brian, would you like to add on anything there?
Yeah, that's something that I think a lot of people think you have to have a specific person to follow and to even mentor from. You really understand that you can learn from anyone, whether it's in books or movies. Throughout history, the person doesn't even have to be alive. Going and reading a person who did some amazing event and then reading their autobiography, or reading a history about their life, you're gonna understand that it wasn't even just that event that they were famous for, that there was a long series of struggles and tests that led up to that helped shape their character. And that's what really made them a leader. And all of those lessons are valuable. By studying someone's life, especially in the context of someone who's already passed on, that's really useful, because you can look at all the lessons and all the experience that they had, or some of the greatest ones from that, and then apply those to your own life without having to have gone through all those experiences yourself. So that's a really useful thing. So understand that tapping into a book, to study, for the purpose of learning more about leadership and mentorship is a very, very useful thing. And the next little thing that we want to hit on here is that I think a lot of people have a skewed vision, or a tainted vision of leadership. And then that means that you're just trying to create followers or have people just listen blindly to what you're saying. And that's the exact opposite. That would be an example of very poor leadership. Where leadership is kind of neutral when you think about it, like most things are. That it's the intention in what you're doing. If you're actually trying to lead the way and forge a path that can actually help empower other people and then teach them how to do that as well, so then they can go on and then advance upon what you've built on. That's real leadership. Like, as you were saying, leaders develop leaders. So and I think that tarnished perception of leadership comes from the fact that so many people have had so many poor examples in their life of leadership, whether that could be from like their parents, school teachers, politicians, employers, people that their bosses that they had to work, lots of different examples. And when you see so many poor examples of leadership, that's actually kind of the normal thing in society. People then just will have a knee-jerk reaction out of that trauma and kind of just go with that black and white response and that kind of thinking, where they just all already go to the other extreme of that all leadership is bad. And it's not that. Like, true leadership, that can really inspire someone else. Like, if you are willing to kind of do something totally radical and new that other people didn't do and lead the way there, that inspires other people to start kind of pushing those boundaries as well. And that's how we can really start to grow. So it's a valuable thing. And I think it's something that in the kind of general, I guess, what, if you want to call it the freedom community or whatever label you want to put on it, if we're wanting to create more freedom in the world, we have to start leading ourselves. And so it's a valuable skill that we need to start looking at more. And I think so many people overlook it, coming from that kind of knee-jerk reaction of, they see that there's a control system, so they don't want to be controlled by anybody. So then they think, all leadership is bad. And
yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously, anyone who's apolitical or anti-political understand that those who are masquerading as our leaders are literally, the furthest thing from true leaders. And so we know that system is immoral and harmful. And obviously, so, to change things, you need to have a better alternative. Well, this is that better alternative. I mean, anyone who's familiar with the basic tenets of voluntarism, anarchism, whatever you want to say, own yourself. And that means owning personal responsibility. And I mean, really, in the heart of it, that's really what leadership is on a fundamental level: is own yourself, be responsible, be a damn adult, and lead yourself, and master yourself. Like, that's, from more of a spiritual perspective. How are you going to lead yourself if you don't even know how to control yourself, control your thoughts, your intentions, what you're creating? I mean, this all goes in hand with the very fundamentals of the Wizard Factory. So, that's why this is of an utmost importance to really understand and bring into your own life. And there's so many resources out there of how to learn more about this. And this is essentially a very similar path that Brian and I are now on, and especially in the last few months have really taken a turn in that direction, because as most of you know, we're all about the solutions here. And so, like, yeah, the problem, just recognizing the problem is just the first step. Then you have to be all about the solutions, because otherwise, what's the point of recognizing the problem if you don't want to do anything about it, or you don't feel you have the power to do anything about it? And being a leader really means understanding that you are responsible for your life, for your actions, and what you're creating in the world.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So the next little thing and this is a useful thing that I picked up from a book called Launching a Leadership Revolution by Chris Brady and Orrin Woodward, which is a really great book. If any of you haven't read it, definitely check it out. But it covers the 5 levels of leadership. So we're going to go through each of those. So if you think of this kind of as a pyramid, we're going to look at the foundational level first, that all leadership is built on, and then we'll work up through the levels to where it gets to the highest level of leadership there. So keeping that in mind, if we look at that base foundational level, the first one, it starts with knowledge. So all leadership begins with knowledge. You have to constantly educate yourself. The mind is the most important thing, and it's the number one investment you could make, is in yourself and your mind, because it's the variable that no matter what you're doing in your life, the mind is the variable that it's always there. It's the constant, you know. So, you know, be investing in that. So learning and educating yourself is the first step. The second level of leadership after you start educating yourself is you start implementing it. So this is the performance level. So you are taking the knowledge that you've learned and then you're then implementing it. You're performing. You're out there doing that. And then from that, you start to learn more lessons. You do what's PDCA, plan, do, check, adjust, as we've talked about a little bit before. And as you go through that process, you'll learn those lessons. And then that leads you to the third level or the third stage of leadership, which is called leadership itself. So you have knowledge, you've been performing that knowledge, and then you start showing others how to do the same. Mm. Then that leads to the next stage of leadership, which is leaders who create other leaders. So now that you've been teaching other people how to do the same, you've been teaching them how to educate themselves, how to start performing, how to become leaders, you know, that's when you move into that fourth stage. So you want to be a person that sees people with the potential, helps turn them into a leader, mentor them to become a leader, bring out the best qualities of themselves. That way they can go and do the exact same thing, because you want to make it duplicatable. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. We need each and every individual to be sovereign and to be able to lead themselves. So you have to have leaders that teach other leaders. So this is a very critical point in this. And then the fifth and final stage, and the largest goal that a leader could work towards, are leaders who lead to leave a legacy. So this is leading for a purpose of developing other leaders that will leave a legacy behind, that even when after you're gone, those lessons, those things that you have done can still be of value to people, still help them on their journey. You know, and history is full of examples of this. You know, there's so many different examples you could use for sure. Yeah, so very useful chart to understand.
Absolutely. And you can really see how, Brian and I discovered this in a very exoteric, seemingly, source of information, but not all, basically anything that is exoteric has a hidden esoteric layer to it. So you can always dive in deeper, even if you're learning, from the sources that you wouldn't expect, that aren't necessarily talking about spirituality or anything like that. But you can very clearly see the trivium process right in here. I mean, the first step is knowledge. It's where it all begins. When you're a baby, you're brand new to this world. Nothing makes any sense to you. You're literally just a sponge of information, just taking it in, learning. And then what's the next step? Performing. So now you're starting to learn what colors are. You're starting to walk. You're starting to actually perform actions, hold your own bottle of milk, things like that you can start. It's all about sovereignty. It's about learning more and more, autonomy, personal responsibility, this overall theme of I can do it myself. That's what every little kid wants. You try to help them tie their shoes and they're like, no, I can do it. They like feeling, in power. And then, of course, beyond that, it becomes the cycle of teaching knowledge. The same knowledge that you've learned, you can now pass on to other people to shortcut their journey. But also the best way to learn is to teach. I definitely discovered this when I was teaching guitar lessons. It's like, it was making me such a better player, but especially like the learning the theory about it, because you're explaining, and like they ask questions that you wouldn't have asked, that forces you to explain it in a different way and kind of like fire different neurons than you're used to. So from there, from teaching knowledge, then you go to teaching leadership. So teaching others how to teach knowledge, essentially. And then of course, the end game is lasting world impact. So leaving that legacy, so that you are just leaving the world a better place than you came into it. And much like raising a child, you want to do such a good job raising that child that when you're no longer around to be their parent, to help them, they are going to be just fine without you. You've taught them all the life skills that they need to be a functioning and responsible adult. So, in a nutshell, you can look at it like that, at the sort of the exoteric and esoteric perspectives on it, because of course, general thing can be applied to anything whether you're talking about just a basic like pottery or all the way to the deepest spiritual level or something like
Mhm.
that. So.
Right. Yeah, it's very useful. And especially, I like that you brought up the parenting perspective, because that's, if, not in just developing leaders, but if, as a parent, if you start thinking from this perspective and because as a parent, you should be a leader, a role model for your child.
Hmm.
So setting that leadership example and then teaching them that it starts with that education, and then you have to implement it. And then, teaching them all these skills and like leading them to the point that they become so great they leave a legacy, because what parent doesn't want their child to do amazing things in the world? We all
Hmm.
want to do that. We all have something great inside us, and these are essential skills for bringing those out. They're necessary. So that, really important episode. That's why we've been wanting to do this one for a while, so we're
Hmm.
excited to.
Yeah, you could even look at step 3 as the part where you become a parent. So you're a child learning, and then you're learning to perform, and then fast forward to you have your first child. Now it's time to pass that basic knowledge on of how to tie their shoes and all that kind of stuff. And then,
Right.
and then there's that cliche of like, sometimes I wonder if I'm raising my kids or if my kids are raising me. Like, kind of they
Yeah,
reflect a lot back to you through
absolutely.
that unrefined version of you in that
Hmm.
process. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. So another little thing we want to talk about here was that it's a funny little phrase that I heard listening to an audiobook, and it was become a possibilitarian. I think that's very interesting. That's something leaders do. And what do I mean by that? So become a person that thinks about things in the sense that they're possible. And what
Mhm.
you're doing here, when you accept this mindset, getting back to the principle of mentalism,
Mhm.
is you really start to embrace the power of your imagination. Because when you believe things are possible, your imagination, you really have that ability to tap very deeply into that and then bring that into creation. That's a very magical act,
Mhm.
and that's really what leaders do, is they have ideas that are something out of the norm, because they're leading. They're the first ones doing that. So they're by default doing something out of the norm. They need to be able to tap into that imagination and then know how to bring that into manifestation. So, being a possibilitarian, accepting that mindset, it is a major difference than what 95% of the people kind of have in their general thinking, and again, it all goes back to the principle of mentalism, shifting your mindset and getting that correct. That's where it all starts.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And what that kind of sparked for me there is that you hear a lot of people say like, oh, you're an optimist or you're a pessimist, and then you got people that think they're cute and they're like, no, I'm a realist. But even that is kind of just the left brain version of that. Be a possibilist. So you're living in the real world. Be a realist too, but also don't be so realistic that you shut yourself down from new possibilities. And that would be like the
Mm-hmm.
right brain, feminine, bringing into balance of balancing being a realist with being a possibilist. So
Right.
that's an interesting way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, with leadership, you have to right out of the gate understand that it's about transformation through struggle and working hard to achieve the life that you desire. If no one's coming to save you, if there's no Jesus or Daddy Trump or whoever it is coming to fix your life and kiss your boo-boos and everything, like, it's on you. And life is challenging, but remember, like, that challenge is what literally creates strength and new potential. So you're not going to get ripped and super fit without challenging yourself physically at the gym. You're not going to get a diamond without that immense pressure on that coal to transform it into something new and beautiful. And that's what this is really all about, is not just accepting that, but loving that, being dedicated to the struggle, the challenge, the journey, whatever you want to call it. It's the hero's journey of going from something unrefined into this new version, this better version of you. So I mean, like, if you're not addicted to that process, then you're going to continue to stay exactly the way you are now, and continue to create the exact same results that you're getting now.
Yeah, that's, very much similar to that Saturnian energy of having
Right.
that pressure of Saturn. And when you look at Saturn, it deals with discipline. It deals with, having that pressure and that apophatic process of having the struggle of like, oh, that's the way not to do that. Like, and that's really useful that, you need that to become a leader. You need to really, like you said, embrace that and learn to love that, because you understand that struggle is what is going to refine you and ultimately make you a better person, for sure.
Yeah, I was going to add that quote there. I love this. If you want to shine like the sun, first you've got to burn like it.
Right.
Because
Yeah,
that's what you're seeing there. That greatness is a product of that struggle, of that alchemical process, for lack of a better word. That's exactly what that is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and that really leads into that burning, that desire and that willpower. That's the driving force that, makes a leader and keeps them going through all those struggles. So that's very, very necessary. You have to have that positive mindset. You have to have the correct mindset. And then you have to have that willpower, that burning desire to want to win, and then keep pushing through that. So,
which is the care.
Very essential.
It all starts here. What you care about is what is going to drive you to actually take action.
It's the generative force.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, hand in hand with this is being willing to accept failure, or again, in fact, embrace that, because we understand, as wizards, as occultists, we understand that the laws of nature, this is how it works, this is how we learn. It's that apophatic learning process of learning what to do by doing what not to do, and learning that was not the correct thing. It's kind of like that. Of course, you can dispute or challenge the accuracy of this, but as an allegory, it still stands true. Is the story of Edison being interviewed about the light bulb, and they said, you failed 10,000 times, and he said, no, I didn't. I successfully discovered 10,000 ways to not make a light bulb. And that's really on the money there. Whether that's true or not, or he actually said that, or whether he actually invented the light bulb, Tesla. But either way, it's definitely, somebody has to overcome that hang up of scared to fail. They're all going to laugh at me. I'm going to look, like I'm going to disappoint someone, or I'm going to look stupid, or whatever it is. That's just utter nonsense, because like you literally cannot create a different world or think in a different way without assuming that risk. And it's just part of it. And most of the time, the fears that you have about, oh, this is going to happen, and then, this will be the result of that, 9 times out of 10, it's way worse in your head the way you pictured it than how it actually goes down. And then you realize over time, especially when you first kind of step out of your comfort zone and start taking those risks, you start realizing, this isn't as scary as they all said it was. Like, sure, there's, things that could go wrong or whatever, but it seemed way worse in my head than what it actually is. And it's not so bad. So.
Well, yeah, that attitude of being willing to embrace failure, and even in a sense, kind of looking forward to it in some way, because what you realize is each of those failures, they're not really failures. They're just steps to success. Because in every process, you might learn it might not be a total failure, in the sense, like if you're trying to learn to do something new, it's not that everything you did was wrong. It might have just been a couple things. You might have found a couple things in that same experiment that you were doing that were really valuable, that you can take forward, that were necessary to get to where you need to go. And then you just need to trim off some of the other stuff. So understanding that failure, there is a lot of value. There's a lot of learning in there, and having that attitude, because, people, like, if they're thinking about, going on a new endeavor, or, trying to get a new job, or start a business, or, whatever it is they're trying to get into, a lot of people have the idea, well, what if I fail? You're only guaranteed to fail if you don't try.
Exactly.
Like, if you refuse to give up and you want to accomplish something, there's no such thing as failure. You might have some setbacks, but you're not going to fail. And that's the mindset you really have to start to, adapt as a leader. The next little thing I want to hit on, and this kind of ties it back to the value books that we were talking about earlier, is a useful quote that I found. And it's that not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers. So it's really, really understanding the value of being able to delve into a book, like taking time every single day to dive into something, and especially reading for a purpose. Like reading for fun, reading fiction, that's totally fine, very useful, in fact, especially if you're, looking at it from a way of gauging like psychic weather, or, but that's a different subject. But reading for the purpose of learning to become a better leader, or for self-development, or learning better communication skills, better relationship skills, whatever it may be, that's very valuable. And if you actually set aside time every day into investing in yourself, into your own self-development through the act of reading, you'll be absolutely amazed at what happens to your mind and how much more motivated you'll become to start learning more and more.
Yes. And not to mention, if you're taking it back to the 5 steps or the 5 levels of leadership, well, the first step is knowledge, and everything past that is built on that. So if you're not taking in new knowledge, your followers or whoever that you're mentoring, they're going to quickly outgrow you because they're growing and you're not. So it's important to like let that almost challenge you in a way, to always want to feel like you're taking in new things that you can then share with others, to continue to share value with them.
You sparked something there for me on the levels of leadership, and I think that's a good to remind, when you're understanding as you move up that pyramid of levels of leadership, you're not stopping doing the other steps below that.
Yeah.
Like, knowledge is always there. Performance always needs to be there. Leadership always needs to be, like, those always are there. So it's not like you're moving to a new level and you're like, now that those other things are below me, so I'm not doing that anymore. No, you're just integrating and taking action on more of those.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, leaders can learn even from people they disagree with. You don't have to love somebody personally to take value, whether it's something they said that you thought was truthful, or even, again, through that apophatic process, learning from people how not to behave, what not to do. That's just as powerful. And of course, I wanted to touch on really the absolute importance of integrity. And one way you could look at that is to lead by example, even when no one else is watching. So you're an example unto yourself, because no matter who doesn't see you, or who you hide from, you can't hide from yourself. And you have to live with yourself. You have to judge yourself based on your own actions. That nothing is more important than that, in terms of like, you gauge a person not by who they are, what they think, but what they do. A bad person is somebody who does bad things. So, that in that context, integrity is, extremely important, to always hold yourself accountable, because again, that's what a leader does. And if you are finding value in this content, take a second and like the video, help other people see this. So yeah, Brian, would you like to start us off looking into the next topic, which is communication and sales?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what are sales? Essentially, a lot of people, I think, kind of maybe have a stigma about sales. Like, they hear that word and they're like, or salesman, and they're like, oh, that, it kind of has like a a dirty stigma to it, or people are like, oh, that's slimy salesman, or oh, they're manipulative people, or they're liars, or like that. You kind of think of that maybe that societal image of like the car salesman, that he's just there and he's just trying to pitch you whatever it is. But
right, it's just this general idea that salesmen are always just looking to exploit people rather than offer value.
Right, but I'd like to really reframe what sales are. So true sales, when you really break it down to the fundamentals of what it is, it's being a matchmaker. So you understand that you have something, there's someone that needs something, they have a need, you have a solution to that need, and then you through effective communication, being the connection between those two. And that's all sales really is. And sales are going on whether any monetary exchange is happening or not. Like everything is, like even ideas are being sold. Like when you really think about it.
We're selling right now.
Right. Yeah.
Actually, free podcast.
Right.
Selling a free podcast. We're selling ourselves.
Right. Because when you think about that, in any communication, even if you have like in a relationship, you have an idea that you want to communicate to your spouse. What do you have to do? You kind of have to sell them on it, right? Like these are effective skills. So when you start to reframe it and think about it like that, and you understand sales are going on all the time, it's really just a matter of whether or not, like, are you good at it or not? Like, so developing those skills and those communication skills are very useful, like in the business world, like absolutely. But in all the other areas of your life, they're very useful as well. So we're going to delve into these here.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. Basically, a salesman is someone an authentic salesman, we could say, just to kind of differentiate. Of course, there are sleazy salesmen out there, and that's kind of what gives it a bad rap. But in its truest form, being a salesman is one who is a problem solver, who's very effective at communication. And what that means is you know how to influence. You know how to influence whether you're trying to sell something that isn't good for them, or literally tricking them into doing something that's actually going to enrich and value their lives more. And there's nothing wrong with influence, as opposed to control would be where you're kind of forcing something. Influence still respects other people's sovereignty. You can ignore, you can brush off, you can reject information at your own discretion. But I mean, think about this. Even the values and principles of freedom is a sale, and like those who claim to be about freedom, how are you going to get there if you can't sell freedom to others and make it sound as good as it actually is, like to properly represent it, to influence them to consider more voluntary alternatives to the current system? I mean, that is sales in a nutshell. And even if there's no monetary exchange, a sale is still occurring. It's basically just shifting perspectives, influencing people to reconsider different choices, ideas, perspectives, whatever you want to say it. And so, like I said, how do you sell? Good communication, understanding and genuinely wanting to help people with their problems, get their dreams, whatever that may be.
Right. Yeah. Because I think it's a good point that you brought up with wanting to spread like the message of freedom, for example. The way we could highlight that is we understand that there are a lot of people out there who are oppressed, that there's this control system, right? So there's a problem, right? What is the solution? Having anarchy, voluntarism, having a free society of people that are all sovereign and working together to create a better world, and then so you have that message, and then you just need to connect that with those people. So if you're really wanting to represent that message and give to people, you need to start to develop these skills, this communication, start to develop tact. That goes a long ways. Like realistically, if you're just acting like an asshole, you find that when people do that, they tend to isolate themselves. They push themselves away from their friends, their family, all these things. And if you're isolating yourself, you're not going to be able to influence anybody. And if you're being honest with yourself and you want to create more freedom in the world, and there's a message you have to get out there, you have to be honest with yourself enough to say that you want to be able to influence people so they can become more free and have a better world. That's not a bad thing. Like all things, it's neutral. It's the intention behind it, you
Mm.
know. So that's very, very useful to understand. And public speaking, learning to develop your public speaking skills, even if you aren't a person that plans on ever going to like a large stage or event or anything like that, developing those proper skills are going to be useful in your relationships, in any job that you're working, in dealing in any situation in your life, just out in public, being able to have effective communication is going to be very useful for you. But then even more, if you are wanting to really reach a lot of people, like many of you listening probably are, that's a very essential skill to have, to learn how
Mhm.
to be able to speak to a lot of people, or learn how to host, do a podcast, and to be able to get your message out there effectively, so that people will hear it and then they'll actually want to apply it. But if you just go around insulting people or calling them sheep or telling them they're dumb and they just don't know as much as what you do, that's not going to get you anywhere. So
Mhm.
realistically, if we're being honest with ourselves and we do want to create change, we have to learn how to do it in the most effective way possible. And communication is essential to that.
Exactly. And with that said, like public speaking is just sales on a stage to a larger group of people. So you're selling to your wife or your friend or whatever, when you're trying to convince them why you should order pizza instead of go to whatever, like to a restaurant or something. Like
Right.
literally, it's just a way of influencing to get what you want. As long as what you want isn't exploiting or like to someone else's detriment, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with being selfish and trying to achieve your desires in life. I mean, that's just a basic life skill. And so yeah, and again, like, so think of just that on a stage. Like, some people sell by public speaking, whether it's the ideas of freedom at Anarchapulco or it's a motivational speaker trying to sell a book. I mean, it's all the same thing. It's basically just sharing big ideas, trying to inspire people and sharing value and give them something that they may can actually take and put as a tool or something to empower their lives, essentially. So moving on to the next topic that we wanted to touch on, which is marketing. Again, this is a dirty word to some people. It kind of similar to sales in that it's like getting in people's heads or trying to sell them products they don't need or whatever have you. And again, there definitely is a lot of that, especially Coke trying to sell poison to kids, basically Coca-Cola. But marketing in its fundamental form is essentially just attractive and effective presentation using artistry, psychology, and tact to cultivate familiarity, likability, and trust in order to achieve a desired effect. And again, a desired effect can be whatever. It can be a good effect, a negative effect. It's neutral. This is essential. Like, compare it to just the occult in general. Like, some people think the occult is evil. Some people think it's whatever. It's just a tool. So like any tool, like guns are neither good or evil, they just are. It's in how you use them. So this could be a sale, but it could just be to share an idea, or even just yourself. Like, even your social skills is marketing. Even when you post on Facebook, you're marketing yourself. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with learning how to do that more effectively. That it's just another life skill that again, our failed school system doesn't really teach how to think about these kind of things.
Mhm.
So one quick little thing in regards to this is, just keep in mind, even the truth needs good marketing, especially today's day and age, in a world rampant full of lies. Lies are being marketed all over the place. The only way to even out the playing field is to learn how to market the truth in a more successful, impactful way. So whether you're thinking about, starting your own podcast or some kind of liberty-minded sort of projects, or sharing ideas, or whatever it is, from grandiose to normal size. There's nothing wrong with either way. But basically what we're getting at here is marketing is just yet another really valuable skill to have, regardless of what you're trying to achieve in life.
Right. And what it ultimately is about being able to maximize your potential and your effect that you have. And think about this, in the world that we live, everybody has to do something. You're either working for some kind of a business, or if you want to start your own business, no matter what your product is or what field you're in, guess what you're going to need? You're going to need to be able to have marketing skills. So these are skills that are really, when you learn them, they're universally applicable to any area of your life. So that's why we're really, hitting on them and, pointing out why they're so essential, especially in the context for those of us who are wanting to create a world with a lot more freedom in it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, even just think of what, like, an image in your mind of what a freedom fighter looks like. Like, you imagine ragged, just wearing rags and, old hand-me-down weapons and equipment and stuff. Like, I say that it's time to make truth and freedom look as professional as lies and slavery are. I mean, literally just think about that for a second. Like, we need to get on the same level as the ones that are exploiting people, who are keeping them asleep and sick and everything else.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, you're okay. I was just agreeing with you.
That's all I had on that point.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So really, a very interesting thing, and because this is the Wizard Factory, we'll kind of bring this one up here, a very interesting thing about marketing and sales is it is an absolutely wonderful place to study magic and the occult.
And practice it.
And practice. You're going to find some of the world's most powerful magicians in these fields. And the reason is because it deals with, as Logan mentioned earlier, artistry, psychology, so many of the other exact same fields that, are in magic and the occult. And when you can put them out there, it gives you a really, really unique opportunity as a magician. And that's this. It allows you to quantify your results. That is, especially in today's day and age, for, magical research, that is extremely useful. It's a lot of fun. And when you think about that, start thinking about how powerful that is. When you recognize that all these tools are out there, and that if you just practice, the amount of knowledge and insight that you can gain, extremely useful. It's absolutely invaluable. So looking into these fields, if you're wanting to study the occult, absolutely look into sales and marketing as well.
Absolutely. And when you understand this, you realize that sales and marketing are just generally incredibly valuable skills, no matter who you are. So, I mean, that in a nutshell, up till this point, everything we've covered, that's kind of why we chose to include this information in this episode, because we understand that so many of you may have that sort of negative stigma about those words and think, oh, I would never do that. I wouldn't stoop to that level, whatever it is. And, I would just encourage you to ask yourself, are you holding that position like clinging to it emotionally, or is that a logical and rational position to hold? And that's why we touched on these topics, to offer some insight and perspective on the other side of that, to maybe get people to kind of rethink what they hold to be true about these topics.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Nice. So that kind of like leads us into the next little section that we want to hit on here, and that's entrepreneurship in business. These are very, very effective, especially, again, considering that we're coming from the perspective here of wanting to create more freedom. So if you're wanting to empower yourself, you're wanting to take your life back into your own hands, the way to really start doing that is through having your own business, and especially through entrepreneurship. So we're going to delve into this. So, the financial matrix, this is something we're going to be if you're not familiar with that term, we're actually going to be hosting a webinar that Logan and I have been working on that we'll put together, but we're going to talk about that more then. But in short, the financial matrix is a term that you could apply to the control system that really, to sum it up shortly, it keeps people broke and disempowered, right? So entrepreneurship is really the easiest answer to figuring out how to escape out of that system and to take control and power back into your life. Because instead of working for someone else, being someone else's asset, and then you being a liability for yourself, you're becoming your own asset as an entrepreneur, and then you're working for yourself. You're taking, your life back into your own hands. The time, instead of being on, someone else telling you where to be and what to do, you are doing all those things for yourself. So, that and sovereignty really do go hand in hand.
Absolutely. I mean, I think most of our viewers are pretty well aware that this system is rigged against us. It's designed to keep you trapped and to keep essentially your choices limited. And so that kind of brings me to my next point, which is money equals freedom. And I'm sure that right there will make some people lose their minds because they're coming from this pseudo spirituality, vestigial Christianity or New Age mindset that money is selfish and greedy and makes people do, or like all the evil people are rich, so therefore money's bad, or whatever it is. But just think about money as a choice multiplier. If choices equals freedom, money brings about more choices, more options for you in your life. You have a dream to visit Hawaii. You have a desire, but you don't have a choice because you can't afford it. So you desire it, but it's not a choice that's available to you because you have a shortage of resources. So, until that goes away, poverty is the opposite of freedom in the economic space, not as a blanket statement, but in this context. Money or poverty is restriction. And so entrepreneurship is essentially the answer to that, because I think most people have figured out, at least on a subconscious level at this point, nobody's going to get rich trading their time for money, bucket by bucket, hour for hour. The statistics alone, show that that's an absolute wash. So.
Right. Yeah, you can do the math on it, and it's real limited. So, but again, so when you think about it from that context, you can really see how sovereignty and entrepreneurship go hand in hand. Because as a human being, your most valuable resources that you have are your time and attention. So when you're working for someone else, what you're doing is you're allowing someone else to tell you where your time and attention is going to be spent. And in exchange for that, you're usually not getting nearly what you should be worth. The wages of debt slavery, they're usually pretty low. So when you start to be an entrepreneur and you can take your time back in your own hands, you can decide, oh, I'm going to study into this subject. Oh, I'm going to get into this field. I'm going to work on this project. You're still working, but you're working for yourself. You're your own asset. So all those hours that you're spending, those are investments into yourself. Whereas if you're spending those hours working for someone else at a debt slave job, that's an investment into them, into their company. So, become an entrepreneur, start taking your life back. You're taking your sovereignty back into your own hands. And there's some, whatever your gift is to bring to the world, there's a way you can start to, utilize tools that are out there. There's so many tools, and again, those are some of the things that we're going to be getting into in that webinar later on. But
right. Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, sovereignty, like if the system is anti-sovereignty, then sovereignty is the act of, reclaiming what is yours, what was taken for you or from you, or, what you've been convinced to giving up, quote unquote, voluntarily, so to speak. And so, money is just a tool. And tools are, my definition of a tool is an object that wields power, and power to me is potential. So again, there's that theme of freedom is choice, it's potential, it's potentiality. So if you don't have the tools, you have less freedom. And it's just a tool. So again, like just like I mentioned before about how all tools are neutral. There's no such thing as an evil tool or a good tool. It's just a object that wields power, and that power can be wielded according to the intention of the user. You don't blame the gun for mass shootings. You don't, blame the hammer for building a homeless shelter. You blame the person. So people can do great things with money. It's not dark sorcery when I feed a homeless person, or when I donate to a GoFundMe, or whatever have you. Like that's legitimate. That's an act of care. And so is entrepreneurship. It's an act of care for yourself. And tying it back to what we said about sales, it's an act of service to others, problem solving, sharing value.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are excellent points. And that's, because that's what true entrepreneurship is it really is just sharing value with other people. So, the next little thing that we wanted to hit on here is this idea of why money is an essential as a medium of an exchange. And that's because there's kind of a funny little phrase that we hear going around a lot, maybe today, is this idea of free energy, right? But when you really look at it, there's no such thing as free energy. Even if you're wanting to build a windmill or solar energy, guess what? You had to mine for those materials, you had to assemble them, you had to plan to put it in there. But there's always some kind of an energy exchange going on. And entrepreneurship gives you the ability to maximize your energy exchange, which is really useful, and especially, like in the context of wanting to create more freedom. You're taking your own time back in your hand. You're starting to do what you love, bring value to other people, but, get rewarded for that value. And then, because there's like the system called the state there now, right? One of the things that, is important in entrepreneurship is learning financial fitness. And you have to understand that you don't want, your money leaving. It's about keeping what you earn as much as what it is about what you earn. So if things like taxes and inflation are taking money out, you want to make sure that you can minimize that as much as possible. So one of the great benefits about being a business owner or entrepreneur is that you minimize those taxes. Because even governments, even with as horrible as they are, they still understand that there has to be an economic system that creates some kind of production. So businesses have to be encouraged. So you can tap into that benefit by doing that. And, there's a system there. So the way you can get rid of that system the most, if taxes fund it, you keeping those taxes from it and into your own pocket, so you can use that resource to actually do something good in the world. That's the easiest way to starve the system dry and start taking the steps to create that world that we want. Like if we just started cutting back the taxes that government had and then keeping that money ourselves as business owners and entrepreneurs, think of all that potential energy that is there to be put towards projects and charities and whatever it is. And it's already there. We just need to start shifting our mindset to use it.
Yeah, and one side note there too is remember that money doesn't only have to mean Federal Reserve notes. And I think that's another place that people get this idea that money's evil is because, well, it's printed by the Federal Reserve. It's, the dark occultist or the banking system or whatever. And that is true. But, first of all, that doesn't mean that you can't do positive things with money. And it also means, we're talking about cryptocurrencies, we're talking about gold, we're talking about anything that can be a medium of exchange, even if you're just trading, an object for a service or a service for a service. Like that is economics. You can't escape economics because there is an economy to the flow of energy in the universe. It's natural law. It's give and take, or like we've talked about in the rune series, there's Gabo, there's the cross of energy exchange, and of the very first rune is Fehu. If you can't master the very first rune, you never even get to the next ones, because you're going to starve to death, or you're going to, in this case, in a more real life scenario, you're going to work your ass off for 40, 60 years, and then get like 10 years on a minimal budget, and then you die. And that's not helping you. That's not helping anyone, except the system that we say we're against gain and us lose. And that's unacceptable. So definitely utilizing the principle of mentalism, because what you're doing by stepping into first the entrepreneurial mindset, and of course subsequently the entrepreneurial lifestyle, is that you're shifting your mindset into investing in yourselves. When you go to work every single day, you're investing in someone else. You're giving them your time so that they can make a profit off of you. This is flipping the script and literally like taking that power back. And you have to imagine everything you create, whether we create a podcast episode or a new educational product or a retreat. We have to imagine it first. Brian and me, we've spent like 6 months of the past year brainstorming about a retreat or multiple retreats that we eventually want to start doing. That will never become a reality until we first imagine it. And as we've talked about on multiple episodes, that's magic. You're creating what you imagination, you're creating through the imagination. And new routes cannot be forged without first engaging that imagination, because that's how you imagine a different way, a new way, an alternative route to create change.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, it's becoming that causal point. Like if you want to have an effect, you have to become a causal point, which is what entrepreneurs and leaders ultimately do. So we wanted to kind of start to wrap up and leave you with a really great example of leadership, which I think is probably one of the best examples of leadership out there. So I was recently listening to a really great audiobook that I got a lot of value from, called Rascal by Chris Brady. And in there, he spoke about the story about Crazy Horse. For those of you who aren't familiar, Crazy Horse was a Lakota warrior in the late 1800s, when the United States government and Army was pushing into the territories. So the backstory on this is, in 1876, the Lakota and other tribes were all gathered at what was known as the Unity Camp, with a famous warrior known as Sitting Bull, another wonderful example of leadership in his own right. But he had, during his life, created a reputation of being a warrior, but at this point he was much older. So they were sitting there, and the reason they were there was because January 1st of that year, the government had issued an edict essentially saying that all the tribes, anyone that refused to report to the reservations would be considered hostile. And then, they would obviously then be, engaged militarily. So that's why they were all at this Unity Camp. Well, while they were there, one of the scouts, they got word from someone that a large military unit, along with a band of some other Native Americans that were allied to the U.S. Army, were about 50 miles to the south and heading their way quickly. So the camp naturally kind of started to get into a panic. And this is when Crazy Horse came in, and he did something that I think was probably such a powerful magical act, and I think it's very interesting to look at. What he did was very quietly just gathered his weapons, put on his war paint. He got the food and water his wife prepared for him, and he got his 2 war horses, and he went out to the edge of the camp. And he just started circling the camp. And then people started noticing, the elders started noticing. And by the second or third lap, they realized that he was performing a ceremony that was known as the gathering of the warriors. So everybody in the camp all of a sudden started taking notice of this, and the other warriors also started gathering all their equipment, and then they also started joining him to encircle the camp, and the women started singing all the strong heart songs. So by the time they had done this, the entire camp was totally encircled with a warrior story. You cannot tell where the line stopped and where it ended. And when it was like that, they went out, and then they met that army that was attacking them, and then they fought what was known as the Battle of the Little Rosebud. And they rode all night, and then they fought all day, and they ended up pushing that army back and won that battle. And then 8 days later, defeated Custer in the Battle of Little Bighorn. Very, so think about that. Like that's a very, very powerful example of leadership. That what he did was simply go out and start leading by example. And then he inspired others to come with him to go leave a legacy, because there was something much greater than himself that he was trying to fight for. Like that's such a powerful thing. And then when you think about that, the energy of the whole tribe being focused on that, and then they took that with them, and then went and won not one but two battles. Like they defeated Custer 8 days later, which everybody's heard of that. Well, this ritual was the point of that. It was that man, Crazy Horse, being willing to just gather his weapons and just go out and start gathering others. And that's, that really leads us into, this is what we're doing here. This is our goal at the Wizard Factory. We're wanting to gather the warriors, and that's really leading us into a project that Logan and I have been working on and putting a lot of heart and effort into. And I'm going to, hand it off to Logan here and kind of let him take it from here.
Right. Yeah. I love that story, man. And it's so powerful. And that would be an example of having a mentor who's long gone. And we all just learned that powerful lesson just from, sharing that legacy, as we talked about before. So this is where we wanted to announce, we've been working really hard on a new project, our own gathering of the warriors, with amazing potential, which has a lot to do with the things we talked about in this episode. So if this information, this episode here resonated with you, Brian and I will be hosting a free web class live on Tuesday night, November the 26th, giving away lots of great and empowering information that could radically and legitimately change your life if properly applied. Now, there is a limited number of spots available, so make sure that you go ahead and secure your seat as soon as possible, because you do not want to miss this. It's going to be really awesome. You guys are going to love that. So if you want to attend this web class, just click the link below in the description and get that locked in. And we can't wait to see you all there. It's going to be amazing. So this is going to conclude our episode this evening. It's been a lot of fun. And of course, thank you for watching. Please subscribe, join our family, our tribe, like the video, and we will see you very soon. But until then, be empowered, be inspired, and be encouraged.